Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jason Oxman. I'm the president and CEO of ITI. ITI is the trade association of the technology industry. We're proud to represent more than 80 of the world's most innovative technology companies around the world. It's my pleasure to welcome you today to our event, Creating Paths for Advancement in Technology. Today marks another important episode in our event series. It's called Bridge for Innovation. It's an event series focused on conversations around equity and opportunity in technology and the workforce. Over the past few months, we've highlighted the broad cross-section of work that the technology industry is doing, from climate change to infrastructure to privacy to security. But all of these industry efforts won't be meaningful if we don't also focus on how these policies affect all communities, including those that are traditionally underrepresented or marginalized. We need to focus on how we can work together as an industry to create more equitable, inclusive, and fair innovation-focused economies and jobs. This means prioritizing efforts such as the inclusion of all communities in the workforce of tomorrow, closing gaps in STEM fields, and supporting extended workplace protections. To help anchor our conversation and help inform our thoughts on this important policy priority, we are delighted to be joined today by Congresswoman Lisa Blunt Rochester of Delaware. She's going to help us think through and discuss how good policies can contribute to solutions that provide equity and opportunity across the technology industry and all U.S. sectors. Now, we're streaming today's session live on YouTube, and a recording will be available on our YouTube channel after this event. And as always, I encourage you to join the conversation on Twitter using our hashtag #BridgeForInnovation. And now it's my pleasure to introduce Congresswoman Lisa Blunt Rochester. Congresswoman Rochester represents Delaware in the U.S. House of Representatives. She also serves as Assistant Whip in House leadership. She's a leading voice in Congress on issues related to the economic and future of work. Congresswoman Rochester also sits on the House Energy and Commerce Committee. She's a co-founder of the Future of Work Caucus, and we could not be more thrilled to have her with us today. Congresswoman, welcome, and more importantly, belated happy birthday to you. I hope you had a great celebration this past weekend, and thank you for taking the time to join us today.
Thank you so much, Jason. Thank you to all of you who are viewing, all of you who work in this space to uplift our country and our world. I had a phenomenal birthday and it just keeps going. So it's my 60th year and it's my diamond anniversary of my birth. So I am celebrating full on. I am just really pleased to be with you because these topics that you want to discuss are vital right now for so many different reasons, but also because it's something we should be excited about and that we should be leaning into. Instead of fearful, instead of reticent, so I am looking forward to the conversation and thank you for having me.
Well, thank you for taking the time to share your thoughts with us. I know this is something you've been involved with for a very long time across your career, even back to your time in state government in Delaware. So I look forward to your perspectives today. So let's get right into it. We have an opportunity to hear from you on the work that you're doing to address this issue of the shifting workforce, the technology-focused economy, and the need to address marginalized communities. So can you help us think through what the tech sector should be doing? What do you want to see the tech industry leaning in on related to workforce and the changing environment for job creation? What do you think that we should be encouraging policymakers to do to create an equitable workforce for all Americans?
Yeah, such a great question and such a great place to sort of level set. I mean, first of all, I think regardless of your industry or regardless of what policies you focus on, I think we got to start off with seeing and appreciating what is happening around us and in the world. You know, just looking at just sheer data, like you got tech people here, so I know data is important to folks. Just looking at the data of our changing demographics around the globe and here at home should signal to us that we've got to make changes in the way that we work, in the way that we live, in the way that we do policy even. And so everything from the ethnic and racial diversity to our LGBTQ plus community, to individuals with disabilities. And now as a person going into my senior citizen years, even us as an aging population, all of these different things have impact on our workforce and how we live and work. And so I think it's important first to look at that, then think about why is equity so important? Why is that a focus? And I think, it's important for many reasons. Number one, in today's environment, it's expected. It is expected that if you are a company, that you are going to be thinking about not just the products that you make, but the services you provide and the people that you hire and your workforce and what that culture is as an organization. I mean, think about it. The equitable workforce is really about our health. It's about the economy. It's about national security. It's about public safety. All of these different things contribute to the workforce. And so, and then the bottom line is, a rising, the rising tide lifts all boats. When we do better as in this space, we lift all boats, and that helps our economy and your bottom line as well. So I think, the things that can be done is paying attention to who you hire, how you hire them, the recruitment, the retention. But even looking at something like products I just mentioned, I'll give you two examples of why it's important. I remember years ago, there was a lot of conversation about facial recognition and how there was actually an incident in an airport where a Black man was identified, taken into custody because of the really flawed facial recognition system. And he actually was a judge. So that was one example. Then you had an interesting example last night at the Super Bowl. So I am literally there with my entire family. We're all watching the Super Bowl, and a commercial comes on about the fact that for decades, maybe centuries, folks of color would always have bad photos. The cameras didn't pick it up, the lighting wasn't right, and someone came out with a product, I won't mention their name, but you know who you are, came out with a product that is conscious of the fact that we have different skin tones. The whole room was buzzing. Everybody was like, finally, somebody gets it. So again, it's good for the workforce. It's good for your bottom line. It's expected these days. And so I would just say there are a whole host of things that we can do, and some companies are already doing, and we can talk about that. But I think it's all about being flexible, being innovative, being agile, focusing on the culture and what you want to see achieved, and then breaking down barriers that currently exist to employing different types of people.
And what a great list of examples there. I love the Super Bowl example because it's not only doing the right thing, as you noted, it's a competitive differentiator. It's going to sell more devices, and in that case, more phones. That's what I liked about it. Combining doing the right thing, as you said, with making product decisions that do the right thing and are also a competitive differentiator, as we saw last night.
Exactly. I mean, in Congress, because we were talking about what can employers do, what can we do? I mean, part of this too is creating that pipeline, right? From and I believe it starts at birth, all the way. But we have things that we've introduced in Congress, like the Jobs Act or the Clean Slate Act to help returning citizens. Again, while we've got a workforce, we know that there are all of these jobs that need to be filled. And then we also know we have a skills mismatch. So the ability to be flexible and nimble and be able to get people trained quickly. Many of you are doing in-house training, using online portals. There are a lot of great opportunities out there to be able to diversify your workforce.
And you have taken that even one step further by encouraging your colleagues on the Hill to focus on this. You're one of the co-founders of the Future of Work Caucus. It's bipartisan, it's unique. It's a great example of why you are the leader on this, taking it as far as putting this caucus together. Can you tell us about the Future of Work Caucus, what it was that inspired you to help put this together, and what are some of the challenges and opportunities that you're looking to address through this caucus?
Well, I'm glad you brought this up. This is one of the things that I am proud to be working on in Congress. When I came in, I got elected in 2016, having never run for anything in my life. But I had the opportunity, as you said, to serve as Delaware Secretary of Labor, as our head of state personnel. All of my jobs, I noticed a lot of them have been about jobs. CEO of the Urban League, worked for a think tank focused on inclusion of people with disabilities. And when I got into Congress, every meeting I would have, there would be some kind of tie to the future of work, whether it was the newspaper, that editorial board that had the future of the paper up on a whiteboard, or I went to a farmer's home in my state. She was literally doing her farming on an iPad and watching the crops. And I started thinking healthcare, all of these different things have this aspect of automation, machine learning, artificial intelligence, big data, how to not be afraid of it and how to not leave people behind. Because that's a big issue too, particularly people of color who, if you're a bus driver or a truck driver, you could get left behind if we go full force. But it also creates new opportunities and new jobs. And to me, this is an issue as a country we can't face as a Democrat or as a Republican or as an independent. This is something we have to tackle together. And so that's why I was inspired to create a caucus, bipartisan Future Work Caucus. And part of it is to educate members of Congress about issues. I mean, many of which we never make the connections, but they're connected. And so that was one, education. Second is to create kind of a clearinghouse so that people know what bills are related to the future of work across Congress. And third, to create a space where we could have real policy discussions in a safe space. And so we've been able to touch on all kinds of things, everything from, future work in rural America to dealing with displaced workers. Our goal is to have a vision for our country and be able to do it together.
What a terrific initiative. And we look forward at ITI to helping support the work of the caucus. And you mentioned that this is not a new focus for you. This is something that you had the opportunity to focus on at the state level as well. And I wanted to ask you a little bit more about some of your time as Secretary of Labor. I should note, the first African-American woman to serve in that role in Delaware. You were an advocate back in your time in state government for these kind of future of work initiatives. In fact, there's a program in Delaware that I wanted to ask you about, the Delaware Pathways Program, that is a model that a lot of other states should look at and that we should be looking at for good ideas at the national level. Can you tell us a little bit about the Delaware Pathways Program and what it meant for the workforce in Delaware?
Sure, be happy to. And just one step back on the future of work, it's interesting that really it was something as horrible as a pandemic. The COVID-19 pandemic pushed the future of work, distance learning, telehealth, telework, all of those different things. And so that's why it's so vitally important. As you said, I think all of my jobs, even going back to college, centered around jobs, even the summer youth employment program going that far back. And, you start to see patterns, you start to see this need for having that pipeline. And so you mentioned, and I'm so glad you did, our Delaware Pathways program, which really is something that, is something to be emulated in a model across the country. It's pretty simple concept that, connecting jobs with people and people with jobs requires knowing what jobs are out there. So part of it is to focus on the jobs that are the present jobs that need folks to go into. And it prepares young people, not just for the theoretical, but again, for the jobs that are out there. And it also focuses on middle and high school students, career tracks, paths where they can kind of go through and they can either go to higher learning afterwards when they graduate, or they can go directly to work. and they get college credits, which contributes to their higher education. And it has had a significant effect. I'm proud that we just got $50 million of investment into this from the American Rescue Plan as part of Delaware Pathways. And again, it lets kids pick a path. Maybe it's agriculture, maybe it's transportation and logistics, maybe it's healthcare, and they get exposed to it younger, and then they get deeper and deeper all the way up to internships as well. And I think, having gone to on a bipartisan delegation trip to the EU a couple of years ago and visiting Germany and talking about apprenticeships, you see that this focus early on and this intentionality really makes a difference. And we're seeing really good outcomes from that program. So I think for me, what I hope to see, because there are many programs out there, like my sister, my late husband, and my brother-in-law are all engineers. Sister went through a program called FAME, Forum for Advancement of Minority Engineers. There are a lot of programs out there, but what we need is scale and systemic. Like, these things need to be baked into how our way of life for schools. And so that's what's exciting about the Pathways program, that I hope to see it replicated across the country, because I think it'll help be that win-win for dealing with skills mismatch and getting people into jobs.
So let's talk about that a little bit more, because that is a great model, and it does take on certainly the largest challenge that the technology industry has right now, which is that pipeline, filling that pipeline with talented, diverse applicants for the literally hundreds of thousands of job openings that exist in technology companies in the US right now. And Congresswoman, you alluded to the fact that the pandemic has changed everything. There's no question about it. In the workplace, we need people with different skills, because the technology industry has changed, as we've all changed the way we work and live and learn. So you mentioned pipeline in your opening remarks. So I know this is something you think about constantly. How do we develop the sustainable, equitable talent pipeline for the American workforce? Can you tell us a little bit more about what we should be thinking about there?
Yeah, I think, a lot of times we say it starts, in grade school, but to me, it begins at birth, and making sure that we have, healthcare to make sure that folks are born healthy. But the idea that we can invest in pre-K and childcare, because when you start behind, it's hard to catch up. And so I think that all of us should be thinking of this as not a social issue. This is also an economic issue. This is also a health issue. This is also an equity issue, to make sure that all of our kids are able to start off strong. So I think of that pipeline starting way early. And I think of that pipeline going all the way through, making sure that our education system meets the challenges of today. I remember visiting a manufacturing plant in Delaware, advanced manufacturing, and they said, look at this place, look how spotless it is, look how different it is. People's perceptions are old school. He said, this is the new. But when we look in our schools and in our classrooms, we look like it's still Little House on the Prairie in some places. And so for us to be thinking about the investment in our schools and in our young people, to me, is a big part of the pipeline. Then we have schools like our HBCUs, our historically Black colleges and universities, and our minority serving institutions, that are also great pipelines and places for employers to actually find incredible talent. Again, looking in the places that you might not have looked before. The same is true with returning citizens. I have a bill called Clean Slate. And it's, again, I call it my strange bedfellows bill, because it is bipartisan, Democrat, Republican, House bill, Senate bill, and we're now doing it around the country. But it helps those individuals who are returning from prison. Maybe they had a nonviolent offense and they've served their time. Well, 9 out of 10 employers require background checks. That cuts people right off. There's a barrier right there in the beginning. And then working with our community colleges, I actually worked with our local community college to say, maybe we start those short-term degrees and programs inside the prison. So again, looking creatively at where are people, meeting them where they are, and then trying to make sure that we scale up and make systemic changes so that that pipeline is available. And lastly, I'll just mention again, whether it's individuals with disabilities or our seniors, there are a lot of people that are looking for job opportunities and have special skills and abilities, and we need to be thinking about that. They called it when the pandemic hit, we saw so many people leave the workforce, even a She Session where 4 million women left the workforce and only 2 million came back because of barriers and challenges. And so again, us thinking about this from all of those different perspectives widens that pipeline. I'm not big at, I don't know all the technicalities of 5G and all that stuff, but I know the bigger the pipeline, the more stuff we can get through it. So let's get more people out here to work.
Wow, that's important to think about all those communities that are ready, willing, and eager to enter the workforce. And one thing I know you've also focused a lot on is non-traditional paths to getting there. You mentioned apprenticeship programs. Yeah. Earlier, and some of what you've seen in looking into these programs around the world. I think we used to have the idea that there was a pathway and it was a 4-year degree and then graduate school. And if you don't have a PhD, you're not going to get this job. But it sounds like from your extensive work on all of these programs that looking at training efforts, education around technical training, on-the-job training, you have focused on that a lot, I know, and it sounds like we should be thinking more about that as well.
I love it. I mean, you're singing my tune. One of the bills I've mentioned briefly that I'm a co-lead on is the Jobs Act, and part of that is to allow for short-term Pell Grants instead of the Pell Grants for the 4-year college degree. We should be able to get people again back to that being rapid response, being agile and nimble. That's important. And then we also have the America Competes Act, which I am so excited about. If you're not following this, this is the companion to the Senate's version of called USICA. Our bill, I've got provisions in with a couple of my colleagues, bipartisan, on supply chain in the America Competes Act, but there's also a focus on research and development. And again, as a country, if we're going to be able to compete, we need to be premier in research and development, and we need to be providing opportunities for diverse researchers. It goes back to that example I gave even about the technology. Who's developing the technology? Who's asking the questions? That's equally as important. So yeah, a community college, you mentioned it. I keep the pipeline as wide as we can make it.
And while we're doing that pipeline expansion, Congresswoman, we are in Black History Month, and I know you have included an important focus on diversity, equity, and inclusion in all of this work that you've been talking about today. So I wanted to take a step back and ask about the role of DE&I in all of these efforts. Obviously, the technology industry, frankly, could do and wants to do a better job than it has historically in attracting diverse communities to that pipeline, to the workforce. So how can we make sure that a skilled workforce that we're talking about is also a diverse workforce?
Jason, if people don't remember anything else I said in this whole thing, I hope that this question, they will have some takeaways, because I feel passionate about this. I feel that we hear a lot of talk, and there's an expectation that there's walk accompanied with the talk. And I have this thing, I call it the 4 A's, and it's awareness, acknowledgement, action, and accountability. I think back to the beginning of the murder of George Floyd, and there was such an outcry. There was so much attention on dealing with issues of race, of our culture, who we are. And there was a level of awareness So first there has to be, you got to see it. You got to open your eyes and see it. Secondly, you have to acknowledge it. And it was one thing when some people would see it, but say, well, that's not what that is. No, that was what that was. And the same is true in our businesses and in our offices and in our companies. And we have to acknowledge where we need to grow, where there is a challenge. Then there has to be action. If you are now aware and then you don't act on it, you've hurt me doubly. You are now you're saying you know, and you're not doing anything about it. So now I'm double offended. I'm double hurt. So imagine individuals that are working with you or for you. Think about that. And the last is accountability. If we mean what we say, then we need to measure it. We need to have goals. We need to know that we actually are seeing a difference. And that can be everything from quantitative to qualitative. I was just, before I got on, I was looking at Maya Angelou, the famous writer, poet, humanitarian. She had a quote that said, people will forget what you said, they will forget what you did, but what they will not forget is how you made them feel. You could put values up on a wall, you could paint the whole wall, the whole room with them. But if people don't feel wanted, if people don't feel respected or valued, they feel it. And sometimes it's a hard place to be. And even as a country right now, a lot of people feel this moment is so horrible. And it is because of a pandemic and all these challenges. But as somebody who's trapped up in the gallery on January 6th during that insurrection, I can tell you that in that moment, I had to believe that I could recommit myself to this country. And that means recommitting to each other as well, across party lines, across demographics, we are stronger together. The African proverb says, sticks in a bundle are unbreakable. If you separate us out, you can break us. But when we come together, we're unbreakable. So I hope that you felt my heart in this, you felt my head in this, and know that if we're going to do these things, we got to do it together. The sky's the limit. The sky's the limit. We just need to do it together.
Inspirational words, Congresswoman. It's a more emotional conversation than I imagined us having on policy matters. But you have taken this to a level that is both inspirational and emotional, and I appreciate your doing that. And I wish we had more time to talk together because you are an inspiration. And I want you to know that you have the commitment of ITI and the technology industry to take what you said to heart and to help support your efforts, because these issues are more than just about people, they're about people's lives. Yes. And I appreciate the way you framed it and the way you've helped us to advance these important issues. You've given us some great legislative proposals as well, because it's good to talk about these things. It's better to help move them forward. So we look forward to supporting your efforts in the caucus on the legislation that you're working on in a bipartisan manner. And you have the commitment of the industry that will continue to inspire you with product decisions like we did last night. I just want to express on behalf of ITI and our member companies how much I appreciate your thoughtful words, your participation, your leadership on these important issues, and most importantly, your time today.
Thank you so much, and happy Valentine's Day. It's all about love. All of this is about love. Thanks, Jason.
Thank you. Happy Valentine's Day to you too. Happy birthday again. And our thanks to you for this critical conversation, and look forward to, as you said, having you come back and join us for part 2. And thanks to all of you who joined us for this conversation today. Our next event in this ongoing Bridge for Innovation series will focus on cybersecurity and privacy issues. Stay tuned, you'll be hearing more on that from us soon. In the meantime, please take the time to visit us online at bridgeforinnovation.org to learn more about this important program and the leadership that the technology industry is showing on all of these important policy matters. On behalf of ITI and our member companies, I'm Jason Oxman. It's been my pleasure to be with you today for this conversation with Congresswoman Lisa Blunt Rochester, and I look forward to seeing you again soon.